Hey guys, if you would like to learn more about The Chosen, the show that I'm talking about today on the episode, check out my latest podcast of the Sega Night Kevin podcast, where I take a deep dive with Dallas Jenkins, the director and creator of the show, about the show itself. Plus, we talk about a few other things by answering some of your questions.
So check it out right now. I think you're going to really enjoy it. The link is in the description below. How's it going, everybody? It's me, Kevin. You know, I bought these trucker hats, like, ironically at first, but now I kind of like them, you know? Got a deer up there. I'm kind of leaning into it. I live in Tennessee, so might as well. I'm well in the unironically wearing a deer trucker hat stage in my life. You know, it is rare that I get to talk about a thing that I actually liked. Having said that, most things I review, there's something I like in it, but people seem to just take the negative. I think they remember the negative because I have better jokes for the negative stuff. You know, they're like, oh, why are you picking on this movie? It's just a sad, low-budget Christian movie. What kind of Christian makes fun of other Christian movies? This kind, ladies and gentlemen. Fortunately, today I get to talk about a thing that I really enjoyed, and I think you, the listener, might also enjoy. Yeah, I have pluses and negatives. I always do, but take all of that with a grain of salt or a whole pillar of salt, if you will. This is The Chosen. If you'd like to hear me talk to the creator of The Chosen, you can check out my podcast where I interviewed Dallas Jenkins. What you may know him from, if you watch my show a lot, he was the director of Resurrection of Gavin Stone. I reviewed it. I said it was a little generic. We talked about that on my podcast, and that was a lot of fun. We had a good time. He told me in that podcast that he was working on this new show, and we talked a lot about that as well, called The Chosen. I reviewed also, for Christmas, the pilot to The Chosen. So the pilot to The Chosen was like almost no budget, kind of a revisiting of the story of the birth of Jesus from the perspective of one shepherd boy. And I liked it. I felt like it was a little slow at times. Literally, it was in slow motion a lot of the time, which is interesting because a lot of times Christian stuff, it doesn't give itself time to breathe. This gave itself maybe too much time to breathe. I don't know. I just felt like I would have liked to have spent more time with those characters. I think I was fairly positive about it. I can't remember. I could have gone back and watched it, but I didn't. The pilot has nothing to do with this really, other than it's kind of the idea of the style. This is much more higher budget. They did a huge crowdfunding campaign, and it looks way better. It's got real characters, and it's a series. It's not just like one-off stories. So I watched it. I finally watched it. Basically, it's another Jesus story. And so when I heard that, I'm like, we really need this again. We've got so many. We've seen this story a lot. My personal favorite probably is Donkey Ali. But let's talk about some things that I really like. I love the aesthetic of the show. It looks really good. It looks very authentic. This is a professional production. I'll tell you what I like the most about this is the characters. This show does something that is rare. With something, for example, like Last Temptation of Jesus Christ, you do have kind of a reimagining of these characters in the Bible, but to such an extreme degree that they're almost unrecognizable, and to such a intentionally offensive degree that anybody who is a Christian is probably not really interested in watching it because it's too much. There's too much sex and drugs and rock and roll. There really is all that in that movie. There's too much like, hey, what if Jesus actually didn't die on the cross? Ho ho! I like that movie, and maybe I should review it sometime. It takes an interesting look at characters from the perspective of looking at things that the people in the Bible actually did and built kind of personality types who would do those types of things. For example, Matthew is a tax collector, and we know that about him in the Bible, but we don't know a lot about what he was like before he met Jesus. But we do know a lot about what he's like after he met Jesus. The Bible doesn't just show perfect people, it has them making bad mistakes and flaws and being concerned about things that Jesus is like, stop worrying about that thing. An interesting thing about Matthew is that even though he's a tax collector, so many times people are like, oh yeah, the tax collectors, they were really bad, and the reason they were bad is because they decided to take more than what they were supposed to be taking from the people. And I'm sure some of that is true. We learned, I think that Zacchaeus said that he had done that sort of thing, but that's not always why the tax collectors were bad. I don't know all the history, but in this, Matthew is actually not doing that. He's just a stickler for the rules, and he's kind of Asperger's-y, and I say that because that's what I was told. Like, I think Simon Peter comes to him and he's like, sir, I don't have the money quite yet. Matthew's like, well, it says right here that you have to pay. Not a lot of regard for the emotional request, but he's not doing anything wrong. He's just saying, well, these are the rules. Other than he's taxing people, which, my libertarian is showing, but that's, that is theft. That's not part of this. But I do like that aspect. It doesn't create these,
He was evil, trying to kill people, and then he was good.
they're just actually like well-rounded characters. And so I really love that about this show. And then the character of Simon is the same way. He's very reckless, kind of playing it fast and loose. He's kind of a Jack Sparrow type character in a lot of ways. And I think that that's really interesting because a lot of times either they're afraid to do that or they just dive right in and are like,
Hey, maybe what if Matthew was actually a prostitute?
and it's like, but that's not interesting. So I feel like this is kind of the first time that we get to see a Jesus and a Matthew and a Simon Peter and Mary Magdalene and Nicodemus and so many other characters in the Bible who are well-developed characters. And I'm kind of a sucker for good character development. Jesus is the same way. It's so often either Jesus is portrayed as like this hippie, like,
Yeah, man, whatever, it's all good.
or he's portrayed as very stern and like,
Come and follow me.
and none of those seem like the type of people who you would want to follow. He just often comes across like a cult leader. Many people would say, well, that's because he was. The Bible somehow is able to make Jesus seem like somebody who claims to be God and also humble. People are like, I don't believe in Jesus, but I really believe in his message and what he had to say. Why? Like, if he's claiming to be the Son of God and claiming to be God, then that sounds like he's kind of an arrogant jerk. And yet, that's not how he comes across in the Bible, even though he's making all these claims. So either he is what he says he is, or he's not what he says he is. And so, that's not me trying to preach at you, but what that is me saying it's interesting because I think that this show kind of pulls off the type of Jesus that is described in the Bible that's impressive. So I like that.
Now, there's things that I don't like.
I will give a heads up, especially the first episode. It's very long and very slow. And if you're watching it, I feel like people are going to see that and say,
Kevin, why did you recommend this? This isn't that interesting.
kind of got to watch that first episode because that sets up a lot of stuff too. The other thing that I don't like is that you have to sign up for VidAngel to watch it, but you know what? Nothing's free in this world. Get over it. I wish it was on Netflix though.
Hey everybody, I found out after filming this episode that you don't have to sign up for VidAngel to watch the show. You can just download the actual app. This is not a promotion of the app, but you can download the Chosen app and watch all 4 episodes. So that's a thing I like.
One last thing, and I don't even know if this is a criticism or not. There is an episode that is fantastic that I really liked where it's just Jesus and these kids. I liked it and I didn't like it. First, I like it that it's just an episode dedicated to hanging out with Jesus. These kids basically are like, they're like spying on Jesus, and Jesus is kind of like playing practical jokes as they're trying to play jokes on him. And I like that. I'm like, this is funny. Just curious about his camp, and they're like, why is this guy living out in the wilderness? I won't give it all away, but it does sometimes, because it's so grounded in reality, I'm like, well, it's a little weird, right? That Jesus isn't like, be sure to let your parents know that you're hanging out with me. Maybe I should meet your parents so they don't think that I'm a crazy man. And he never does that. I don't know. So what? But also, I can't help but like switch over to kind of the mentality of like, this isn't good. But it's fine. It does a good job at towing the line between being a little creepy and being not a little creepy, like being interesting. So it never gets creepy. I'm just like, shouldn't Jesus at least tell these kids' parents that they're hanging out with him? Seems like something Jesus would get the parents' permission or something. But that episode ends really quick, and I'm like, man, I wanted to hang out with Jesus more. That's actually not necessarily a criticism. It's actually good that they made it so that Jesus is that interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with it because there are slow moments. There are things in it that I'm like, all right, let's move it along. But amazing at character development. And it's very interesting. It's an interesting show that I'm like, wow, this is pretty darn good. So yeah, I mean, I say go check it out. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about the show if you got to see it. And yeah, that's it. Hey, be sure to check out my podcast where I interviewed Dallas Jenkins. It was a ton of fun. He was a really nice guy, and we got to talk about all kinds of really cool things. It was amazing. If you're interested in that podcast, I've done a lot of interviews lately, and some of them get released early on my Patreon. Some of those people are the Voicey Here YouTube channel, Ask a Christian Counselor podcast, Jacob and Emily Rugrock, and Amanda Stewart. All right, that's all I've got to say. Talk to you guys later. Good night.